Development Officer here, and I am thrilled to be working with the Wilson Foundation because they have their staff and their board here, and they are an integral part, obviously, of Tight Knit. I'm also thrilled that we have representation from WDET in Detroit, who's also our partner on this project. We're all in, and we want to work with you on every aspect. So just enjoy yourselves. We will have coffee and dessert after everything is done, so don't feel like you have to jump up and rush out when you're done. But with that, I'm all finished, and I'm going to introduce you to, I'm going to make sure that I read this to get it right. So Shannon Cason, who is producer, podcaster, host of Tight Knit. And Shannon, you're going to get us all started. Welcome.
Let's keep that clap going for Sylvia Bennett. And thank you to the Buffalo Toronto Public Media for hosting this. Look around, folks. This is, you've stepped into public media land. I feel like my voice should definitely go down to a nice soft tempo to welcome everybody. I'm Shannon Cason. I'm a Detroiter, native Detroiter here in Buffalo for the first time. Glad to be here for the first time. I didn't get much time to kind of get around because I just got here and I just came here. But I was happy to see guitar signed by so many famous artists in the front because a lot of the music I love is Buffalo. Rest in peace to I know we all know, Rick James. Yeah. You almost want to say something else when you say his name. But Rick James. Griselda, I don't know how many people here know about Griselda, but I was just at a Conway the Machine concert just last week, so I love their music, bringing back boom bap hip hop. Brian McKnight, he was part of two of my weddings that I had, two weddings. I don't play Brian McKnight in relationship settings anymore. But I'm also the host of the Tight Knit Workforce Development Podcast. Tight Knit is a series about the many ways people are working to build stronger relationships and communities. And in season 2, we dove into workforce development. And if you listen to the podcast, you'll know my voice. I'm the host of it. If you don't listen to the podcast, like, what's going on? You don't like me? I mean, it's a soft, public media, nice, welcoming voice about workforce development. I encourage you all to listen. It's been an honor to work with WDET in the leadership of Mary Zatina. She's here. Mary, say hi. And the leadership of Mary Zatina, and also the podcast leadership of Strachura. She was our lead producer for the podcast. We can give it up to her. And we explored the crucial topic of workforce development on the behalf of the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation under the expertise of Susan Dundon and David Egner. So happy to give it up for them as well. Thank you for Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Buffalo, Niagara, and Metro Detroit are both hardworking cities with so many industries. And for our podcast, we primarily focused on manufacturing and skills trade. And the people we spoke to this season on the Tight Knit Workforce Development Podcast all had a passion for their relative communities and cities. The growth of new industries, higher employment rates, and also improving the economic gaps that exist. And today you're going to hear from some of those guests that were part of the podcast because most of our panelists were invaluable voices on the podcast. Many people I'm seeing here I talked to on Zoom and spoke to many of our reporters. Now, I keep saying this word podcast. Do everyone here listen to podcasts? Raise your hand if you listen to a podcast. You know, I've been in podcasting for like over 10 years. Early on, you didn't see that. People were like, they don't know what a podcast is. But most people know a podcast now, which is a beautiful thing. But I won't be shocked if some people just didn't raise, or they raise their hand and they might not know too much about podcasting. Because I do that sometimes too. Fake it till you make it. I was just talking to somebody up there. Say, fake it till you make it, Shannon. So I want everybody to take out their phones. Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. You can take out your phones. And if you don't know about podcasting, ask the person next to you, like, what app do I go to for podcasts? You might even be able to put in that search button, podcast. And I know some of you might even use that. Don't be ashamed. Say podcast into that, whatever your AI is, if you have to use that. Okay. Type in Tighten It and subscribe. Subscribe. Listen. You're going to hear from me. You're going to hear from experienced producers and reporters talking about workforce development, getting the voices of many of the experts who are driving workforce development, because it's so important. I always, as I worked on this project, I see that the responsibility of it and the power of it goes for decades and decades. So it's just so important, and I'm sure they're going to talk about it in the panel. One of my favorite episodes was called The Bus Stops Here. Listen to that episode. Go through all of them. The Bus Stop Here, that's one of my favorites. One of our producers, Jack Philbrant, he navigated Detroit public transportation to try to get somewhere at a specific time. Now that's a joke, if you don't. But he wanted to get somewhere at a specific time. But guess what? I'll let you guess.
He didn't do it.
He didn't even have. You got to listen to the podcast. Listen to the podcast to find out. Listen to the podcast to find out. But that episode talks about the reasons for employee turnover. And we talked about a lot of these things in the podcast. Each episode featured experienced reporters' insight on specific challenges about workforce development. And we have a clip I want to share with you. You're going to listen to all the podcasts, but we have a clip to share with you to compel you to put in Tighten It, subscribe, and listen to every episode. But listen to this clip right now. Tighten It, Season 2, from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. This season, we're talking about workforce development. And with a team of experienced reporters, we're exploring the challenges.
We want to put good people together, and we want them to stay in a job. We want them to get them a job that they can stay in.
We knew that if we wanted to really think about accessible training, access to jobs, training people for better wages, you had to put the training where people were.
And questions.
There is opportunity to also say, well, kids, like, what do you know about jobs? Like, what do you think you're gonna do in the future?
American workers and employers face, and the opportunities ahead.
Oh yeah, of course. I don't want to work for someone else my whole life. You know? Make my own money, be able to go wherever I want.
Employers need to take some responsibility to help train. That means that we also have to help our own colleagues and those in our community help themselves.
You're just not a good steward as a business leader if you're not looking far and wide and turning over every stone to find the best and brightest talent.
Join me as we set out to better understand how good people find good jobs and what schools, businesses, and elected officials are doing to build the workforce of the future. Listen to Tighten It Workforce Development at tightenit.org or your favorite podcast app. Now, y'all subscribe. Did everybody get around to that? Pull out your phone and subscribe. Okay, excellent. That was a very compelling reason to subscribe. So we want to hear some of the voices from the podcast now in this panel. And I'd like to introduce our moderator, and then they'll do their introductions on that side. But our moderator, David Egner, is the president and chief executive officer of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. Egner has more than 30 years of experience. And I talked to him, he said, as he saw the 30, he was like, I've been in it a lot longer than that, but more than 30 years of experience working with nonprofits and foundations from his early years as an executive assistant to the chairman of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, to guiding Michigan Nonprofit Association through its development and mergers. Prior to leading the Wilson Foundation, Egner was president and chief executive officer of the Hudson Weber Foundation and served as executive director of the New Economy Initiative. And so many of those places that I said are near and dear to my career as a storyteller, artist, and as a person who loves Detroit. So I want to welcome David Egner, and thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And thanks to WDET for your hard work on this season of Tight Knit. You and the group did such a terrific job. It's been just marvelous to watch the development of the series. Thanks also to Lafayette American, who worked with us in the production of the series. Thanks also to Buffalo Toronto Public Media for hosting us tonight. And thank you all for being here for this live stream. Also wanted to recognize in our audience tonight, there are trustees and committee members of the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation. It helps my employment if you all applaud. So delighted to have you here as well. So we've set up this panel conversation, and I'll introduce the panelists in just a moment. But first, a moment of why. Why is workforce an issue? And to try to explain this, I'm going to take you back in time. So it's the end of 1961. My father, who is 18 years old, drops out of high school. Why? His new wife is expecting, and he has to support them and their coming soon-to-be charming, handsome, and intelligent son. He finds a job at a local garage, a gas station, because he was a voc ed kid. He had taken mechanics, he had enough to get by. He parlayed that into a job for a company building refrigerated railroad cars. Why? In voc ed, he had beginning welding, carpentry, metalwork. He had all the tools necessary for that company to train him up. 42 years later, he left. He built quite a middle-class family and lifestyle. I'm going to argue that the same system that was in place in 1961 as my father left school is still the same system that employers are relying on today without noticing the changes within the system. I'm also going to point out that high schools across the nation cut voc ed. We cut the pathways to careers as we started pushing everyone solely to a college pathway. And then we wonder why the folks in the middle, the training providers, the community colleges, the Northlands of the world, are held hostage by a group of supplied workforce that have not had pathways uncovered, and a group of employers who have not yet communicated what they need and unveiled those pathways. It's an inefficient system because, frankly, we didn't fix the one that my father went through in 1961. So that's what this panel discussion will be about this evening. And I just want to tell you, I'm going to open with one simple question after I introduce our panelists, and then we want to turn very quickly to you and make this a true town hall. So Shannon and C are going to have microphones after we get started, and please raise your hand when you have a question after we get going here. So we've tried to represent the different tiers that represent workforce with this panel. So Karen Utz represents the public sector, part of Empire State Development, and the regional director here in Buffalo. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
Stephen Tucker, who's president and CEO of Northland Training Center, one of my favorite places to visit when I'm in Buffalo. It's a great operation.
Thank you.
Peter Coleman, an employer, vice president of R.J. Watson. Peter, welcome. And Grant Umberger, who's the director of workforce programs at Jamestown Community College. So, Karen, why isn't the system working?
Starting with government here. Well, let me start by, again, congratulating Shannon and C on the series, the podcast. It was terrific. I did have to try to figure out how to find it, but I did find it. And I would just note that I learned a lot through the podcast, including how to start to answer this question. In your first episode, it was noted that more than 60 years ago, when John Kennedy was directing America to put a man on the moon, in that same speech, he recognized that we needed to address the challenges of the changing workplace. And workforce was going to be super important, that automation was here, that they were anticipating how things were going to change, and America had to keep up with those changes. So every administration since then has included workforce as a challenge to us. And so I would start by saying we haven't failed, we haven't succeeded, we're somewhere in the middle with continuing to try to solve the problem. I think communication is super important when employers and trainers are trying to figure out how do we prepare the workers. We really have to have honest, clear communication. And I think the challenge to those providers often is funding comes in short spurts. They're worried about their own organizational survival rather than being able to focus on the big picture and helping to solve the problem across the regional economy.
Great. So Karen, if I can summarize a little bit, we have a system that's siloed, and we got to bust that if we're going to make this work.
Absolutely correct. We'll talk about this as we proceed, that we're at Empire State Development and in partnership with philanthropy, with the Wilson Foundation, with what the federal government has provided in terms of responses to some grant applications. We are finding ways to work together to create coalitions to solve problems by taking advantage of each of our strengths and being able to parlay that into solutions that we think will be more lasting.
Oh, thank you. Stephen, you're in the middle of this as a training provider looking specifically at a lot of skilled work. Why isn't the system working?
You know, that's an interesting question, and a parallel to me is when you look at most career paths, right, or most plans, people have a plan. Either they're going to go to college, they're going to get higher education, they're going to get a job, have a successful career, and they follow that plan. But in workforce development, and I'll use me as an example, as a practitioner, how did I end up in workforce development? When I was younger, I wasn't in high school saying, hey, I want to grow up and be a workforce development practitioner. I didn't know what it was, right? I just ended up here because I was a participant of the system. I had to utilize programs to help me figure out my career paths, and thankfully they were able to work. But you mentioned the word siloed, and you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the system doesn't function as efficiently as it could. First, we got to understand all the stakeholders in the system. Number one, it's K through 12 education, post-secondary education, the CTE programs that used to be called voc education. Those programs are not always aligned. So from the beginning, we have this disjointed system that's supposed to prepare us for our life's work. But then even if you continue and look at the rest of the partners, you have the nonprofit organizations, you have the workforce investment boards, you have the policy makers. And at the end of that, which really should be the beginning, you have the job seeker and you have the employer. So all of those systems are operating kind of in a siloed fashion, and that's why we have so many gaps.
So those silos sit between the supply and demand.
Exactly.
And fight amongst themselves.
And we need the demand, in my opinion, to take more control of their supply, to be more involved and connected and engaged in the development of their supply chains.
How appropriate that Peter's right behind you. So as the demand side, Peter, why isn't it working?
Well, the demand fell. I mean, from 1961 to probably 2000, you saw a massive reduction in the manufacturing workforce in America. In Buffalo, we probably shed 50% of our manufacturing jobs, and we've been sitting Laura would know better than most, but I want to say there's 1,500 manufacturers employing approximately 60,000 people. Well, in the mid-'70s, that was 150, 180,000 people. So you had a generation, and I grew up in the '80s where manufacturing was dying in the United States. You hear the term advanced manufacturing. You know, that's kind of the jobs that stayed in our local economy. And what still exists today, you know, with skill sets, and most of those non-high skilled jobs have moved offshore. They've gone to China, they've gone to Malaysia, they went to Mexico, low-cost countries. So, you know, vocational programs ended because there wasn't a demand. And then you had a workforce that was fighting for positions, and there was a lot of tribal knowledge. So why would you communicate or tell somebody your secret sauce on how you did something really well when you knew that was job security? And now we have this gray tsunami. We have an aged workforce. There's a significant age gap, I think, in work entry and then people leaving the workforce. It's a culture change. And then being a small, medium, you know, business employer, which, you know, of those 1,500 manufacturers, 1,200 of them are fewer than 50 employees at those companies. We don't have a sophisticated human resources department that is trying to, you know, has the ability to engage a very convoluted workforce development infrastructure that exists. I mean, you just, across this room, you talk about all the educational entities, the voc ed community, all the private sector. You also have a lot of nonprofits involved with this. If you're a small business enterprise and trying to engage the workforce development sector, it's confusing, it's convoluted, it's not efficient. So I would think what we would look for is more of a strategic plan and a cohesive strategy around workforce development that engages industry and industry organizations.
So, Peter, do you know what door to knock on when you need to find
I do,
help?
because I was engaged with the Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance. I come from a unique position. I worked as the president and CEO of the BNMA. I re-entered the private sector a few years ago, but that's unique. You know, I have an advantage. Today, I'm knocking on Stephen's door. And just because I trust Stephen, I've seen the work that he does. I understand his organizational skill set and capabilities, the culture that he's built. I don't think I have found that in many other institutions that serve the sector. I just think it is unique. He's had a lot of support too, but you know, if I need a question answered and I need to be directed in the right pathway, I call Stephen, but Stephen can't take phone calls from 1,500 manufacturers.
Great point. Great point. So Grant, community colleges, really in the middle of this formula. What could we do better to help community colleges, or what could community colleges do better to help us fix this workforce problem?
Sure. Well, unlike Stephen, ever since I was in diapers, I wanted to be a workforce administrator. So that is not true. I agree with everything that's been said. I also want to say that, so as a community college, you know, you usually think of associate's degrees or certificate programs. We're on the other side of that house where we're attracting individuals that may not otherwise attend college. We do focused training that leads directly to a job. We have communication and contact and relationships with employers that perhaps some of the academic side doesn't have. And we have the ability to scale up very quickly and react. However, the irony of this is that we don't have a funding stream to help support the scalability. So if we need equipment, we need instructional support, different things like that, we have to go and pursue funding for this to support this. And I always say, like, we need to find some sustainability to support this. And that could be tuition, but the populations that we're serving, they don't necessarily have the funds to be able to enroll into these programs. So I think that's where there's some of the disconnect. The other thing too is it is getting better, but there was a disconnect with the employers where the employers were saying, I need workers, I can't find workers here. but they weren't necessarily communicating their needs directly to representatives of the college. And again, that's our responsibility too, to go out there and to talk about what their needs are, what their vacancies are, short-term, long-term, how can we help, what type of equipment, different things like that. So it's a two-way street. I think it is improving, but I think it is a collective effort. We can't do it on our own. We need employer input, but we also need support from funders and foundations as well.
Great. So we'll turn to you. If there are questions from the audience, please raise your hand. And as we wait for the first question, let me probe this just a little bit more, Grant. So on the notion of funding, gosh, Karen, wouldn't the state be providing funding for that equipment?
The state is providing funding for equipment, and in particular, in the last 2 years, under the leadership of Governor Hochul, the Empire State Development has stood up a new division, the Office of Strategic Workforce Development, focusing on the trainer's side of the equation, and it has a number of different funding streams. One of them includes the help on the capital side, purchasing equipment to be able to do the kind of training that needs to happen, as well as help with operations based on pay for performance, based on how they're doing. So it's finishing its first year of making awards. We're hoping to have some new announcements soon, but it's an important indication from the state that we recognize the value of making those investments in training to be able to support what's happening in workforce.
And Peter, what about the manufacturing associations and others? Have there been any talk of making sure the right equipment's on the floor of the training center that's connected to manufacturing in the region?
Well, the BNMA was heavily involved with the development of Northland and bringing in the educational partners. Something unique is we brought Alfred State up from the southern tier to work in Erie County. We really appreciated their associates of occupational science. I think one of the problems you see is there is an industry built around 4-year degreed programs. There is not an industry built around 2-year associates or certificate-based programs, nor the funding. Oftentimes, you also see is it's difficult for the community colleges, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, bringing in open enrollment in candidates that oftentimes are not college ready and are thrown to the wolves when they are not prepared, when they show up with a 6th and 7th grade numeracy and literacy capability and they're expected to be doing college level work. The wraparound services that we discovered at Northland and the need and the demand to help people enter the workforce is considerable. But when you look at the financial output of our industry and these skilled trade people, again, 60,000 people generating $12 to $13 billion of gross regional product. You're getting a multiplier effect from these individuals you don't see in any other industry. These individuals are bringing forth $250,000 to $300,000 of value to the local economy. So you would want to see the same investment that is made in a 4-year institution or student for an individual that's going to go to school for 2 years, 1 year, or 10 weeks. And if you had the same dollars put into that educational capability, I think you'd see a different result. And it's the way those monies travel today are cumbersome and difficult and disjointed, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
Oh, Stephen, the wraparound services. Talk a bit about what those look like at Northland.
The wraparound services, in my opinion, is a part of the secret sauce of what has led to our success. Not only the wraparound services, but the outreach and recruiting strategy, meeting people where they're at. We advertise on different billboards, schools, churches, community centers, barbershops, festival events, you name it, we're there. But we also connect students once they've expressed an interest in wanting to pursue careers at Northland with those wraparound supports. Most of the students who attend Northland are first-generation college students. Most of them never thought that they would go to college, didn't think that they were college material. We support them with giving them their own student support team, a team of experts and professionals, and it's their responsibility to make sure their student is successful. That is transformative for these students, but it's a very costly model. We've proven that the model works embedding intense wraparound services with technical training. How do we scale that model? That's the next question.
So Peter, you can see the difference between folks who have been through the Northland model with remediation and those you might pick up by putting a shingle out or bringing people in off the street.
It's all about people. It's all about culture. Developing a culture of just positive attitude. Show up on time. Have a positive attitude. Work well with others. We have a great culture at R.J. Watson. It's been enforced early on, but I think the program that Stephen runs, and we have a candidate that came through a local high school program, a small high school called Alden High School. They had a little career tech program. They're a great feeder to Northland, and then we had a 2-year degree student show up. And a young man that's now 21 years old, wage went from $22 to $25 an hour in a year and a half, and now he's leading our innovative technology for laser TIG welding. That is, we just got introduced and approved by numerous DOTs to introduce a new welding technology for a format that's never been done, and this young candidate is doing that work for us.
Yeah, it's a great story. Shannon, you have
We got a question over here.
I have a question for Peter and for Stephen. Peter, you've seen wraparound services manifested at Northland and seen how well it helps with retention. Retention is an issue in the workplace. Could you imagine having wraparound services at your employment to help with retention? Do you think that will work?
I think we're very deliberate in our hiring practices to make sure that we think we're going to identify individuals. Stephen called it the FBI when I first met him. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, and he calls it the friends, brothers, and in-laws, or?
The FBI approach to recruiting, friends, brothers, and in-laws. Everybody in their network.
So that's a large way that we do it. So we ensure, and we have a good contingent of individuals. I think the wraparound services component, when you have an individual that is stressed at work, and it's hard to engage, and how do you do that without violating their rights, and provide a work environment that's safe and supportive. It is a difficult conversation to have, but I think building that network, I think it's invaluable. Mental health strategies, how do we communicate it through our health networks? But I think what Northland does is unique, and I know it's costly, but I know the benefit just off of the graduation rates that you saw out of the Northland campus compared to other, 2-year programs.
Right. There's a follow-up. Yeah.
Often when you have job seekers come out of these programs, they have wraparound services. The services stop, but the problems don't stop once they get into the workplace. And you see a lot of people fall off because the services stop. Even with people who have been working, they hit issues that EAP, you get your 8 and then you're done, and that only scratches the surface of what this person's issue or compound issues are. For me, I believe that wraparound services is something that employers should think about providing, or even letting CBOs access the workplace. Because if I have an issue and I have a community-based organization that provides social work, can help me, I'm not gonna stay home and try and figure it out. I gotta go talk to Miss Lisa at work so I can handle this. And by the way, I'm also at work.
Right.
Can I actually add something that we talked about in the podcast in a couple of different episodes. One is an organization called Employer Resource Network, and there is a network here in the Rochester area extending out to Buffalo, Niagara. The first one was in Western Michigan, and the idea was bringing businesses together, usually small to mid-size, not always in the same field, but frequently, and talking about what are your best practices, what are your needs, how do you work with your employees and improve retention? But after that, on the flip side of that, they have success coaches that go into the businesses and are available online at all times for all employees. And if you have an issue with, say, your cell phone bill or your grief counseling or maybe just a problem with your boss that you're not sure that you want to bring to HR, any of those things are up for grabs, are up for conversation with that success coach.
Who pays for that?
The businesses pay for it.
So it's the network pays for it.
Yes. Each, in one example, the CEO explained that you might put in like $10,000 each, but your return on investment of that was 850%. And they have numbers for each region. So it's a little different in each region. I think in Buffalo, it's more like 500% return on investment, but that's really significant. I mean, you're cutting back on your turnover loss, those costs, you're keeping people employed, and often finding solutions that, say, involve the training center or government because you've come together and recognized that the businesses have shared issues.
This it's based on a model that Fred Keller, the owner of Cascade Engineering, put in place back in the 90s, and it was a personal mission of Mr. Keller to do that. And he partnered with the state, Karen, in Michigan to do this, and the Department of Human Services actually provided caseworkers right on his shop floor to make this work. Has the state done anything in that way innovative? Is that even remotely possible in New York?
I don't rule it out. I would more specific to what we're doing in the Western New York region, as we are putting together our Western New York Manufacturing and Tech Workforce Coalition. We have a combination of employers, trainers, community-based organizations. We have intermediaries. We have pipeline developers. We will be having an announcement soon about another training organization coming into town that will include those kinds of services and what they're going to be providing. We know that it's important for not only getting a potential candidate trained or upskilled, but we also know in order to keep them in the job, to be able to keep them there, that it's going to be important to find a way to help them through those challenges. There are some employers we know in town that are already doing it on their own. I think that there's a role for the state to play. We're going to do it regionally with the resources that we have, and we'll continue to iterate. We'll use data. We'll see if it's working. We'll see how we can improve it, and that hopefully when we visit this topic again, we'll have more good news to share.
Great. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. David Colligan.
So this question is for Graham, because you haven't had a chance to talk yet, Graham. But I've been a longtime observer of the Jamestown economy, and I'm aware that there are some major employers down there, Cummins Engine being the obvious one, and they have some special skill needs in Jamestown in the industrial area. My brother was a graduate, or was a welder at a place, I think it was called Dahlstrom Industries, which welded titanium. And he went to Jamestown Community College, got a 2-year degree, went on to Colorado School of Mines and became an aerospace engineer with his metallurgical degree. So he was trained well at Jamestown. And I'm wondering, with the almost singular focus that you have on industry in Jamestown, it's very distracting in Erie County because there's so many different industries, and community college students are going in for different reasons. There, I think it's more focused, and I'm just wondering, how has it evolved from 1980 when my brother graduated from JCC to now?
That's a great question. I was alive in 1980. Very much. Well, I think what has happened with Jamestown Community College is, like most SUNY community colleges, transfer liberal arts type of college where, you start there, you get your gen eds, you get an associate's degree, and then your plan is to move on immediately and get a 4-year degree somewhere, transfer articulations with all different types of colleges all over. And that's still very much the case with a lot of colleges. Community colleges, we don't need 30 transfer liberal arts community colleges in the SUNY system, okay? And especially where in Chautauqua County and Allegheny and Cattaraugus counties that we serve is heavy manufacturing. And so we needed to make that pivot. So this all started in the early 2000s with the Manufacturing Association of the Southern Tier that took over and occupied a little space across campus from us that we call the Manufacturing Technology Institute now. They got that up and running. We're working with local employers, started making short-term workforce programs in the early 2000s. The college came in and we started with the welding program, and we've morphed into machine tool, industrial maintenance, mechatronics. And then on the workforce side, we really got focused on this, and it's due to the support from the Ralph Wilson Foundation, from ESD. So, you know, to get really serious about this. And so it started with feasibility studies. It started with talking to employers and really specializing in what are the skills that are needed. And come to find out, like, you know, a lot of the job openings across the nation, only 34% really require a college degree right now if you're looking at the stats. So we needed to come in and really take charge of this. And so that's what we did. And so we have a focus we have a fantastic nursing program. We have an occupational therapy assistant program. We have other programs that are phenomenal, and I don't want to discount them. We are focusing on advanced manufacturing, and we've been headed in this direction for the past 5. Well, with the academic side, it's been more than 5 years. It's been about 15 or so. But with workforce, we have done a little bit of training here and there, but now we're really getting serious and focusing on those short-term training programs that lead to meaningful employment. Our programs also transfer into academic programs, which is fantastic, but that's not the intent of our programs. The intent of our programs is to get people into meaningful jobs and to get them connected with the employers.
Grant, while you've got the floor, there's a collaborative of 3 community colleges in the Southern Tier that's starting to really take shape. Talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So we are Erie Community College, Niagara Community College, and we also consider Genesee Community College as part of a consortium. So we are working together. Someone brought up the manufacturing tech as well, which includes Stephen and other employers as well. And so we're really getting our act together, because what we want to do is we want to premiere Western New York as a destination, as a place where you can get great jobs. It's a wonderful place to live. I'm a transplant, and I've been here 20 years, and I don't want to leave. So we're trying to get that going. So there's other initiatives besides manufacturing that we're getting into together, but we want to work collaboratively. So it's confusing when you're offering, and this happens, we're offering similar programmings, and individuals are saying, well, why should I go here or why should I go there? And we're kind of robbing each other of enrollment to keep these programs going. So we need to work smarter about this, and we are. We're having these conversations about what are your facilities, what are you equipped to do best, what are we equipped to do best, and how can we kind of have a referral system to this?
Terrific. So, Peter, as I think about the ongoing challenge you're having with workforce, do you feel like there's a way to tap in the community college system as Grant just described it? Is there new hope that some programs might emerge, or is it just too early to tell?
I think the manufacturing community is engaged. I know there's programming out there. Northland is engaged with both the Alfred State and Erie Community College at their facility. The BNMA, when I was there, we're housed with Northland. So Northland gave us space in order to have industry involved. And we really based the program off of the Jamestown model with MAST and Jamestown Community College with their manufacturing institute that they had developed there. So there's great engagement. Again, is a 2-year degree what we're looking for? it's hard. It's hard to see these candidates when we need them so badly right now. Is there an apprenticeship type of model that might be more effective? Possibly. I think all aspects need to be looked at. I think the bigger part is finding and recruiting this talent and letting know the opportunities that exist in our sector. And that the wages we pay tend to be significantly higher than the gross median wages of the community. In the manufacturing sector, I think the average wage is in benefits is going to be north of $70,000. I think the median income in Erie County is probably for a household is $54,000 to $55,000. So an individual, when you're in this sector, pretty quickly you are above the threshold for a living wage, and the opportunities exist for you to grow in any of these markets quickly. So you would think it would be in the best interest of the state and the educational community to promote these trades and these occupations, because it will bring family sustaining and long-lasting sustainability to the state as well. And again, we are significant taxpayers.
So I want, great, which is a terrific point, which I want to come back to, but staying on this topic for just a moment, does R.J. Watson have a screening process that looks for that degree and screens people out, or are you an employer?
No, we're looking for people.
Okay.
We're looking for, and again, we're limited to the types of equipment. We're looking for skill sets. We're looking for people with experience, especially if you're a welder, fabricator, if you're a machinist. Machining to us is, we've been welding and fabricating for 30 years. Machining we've been doing for 7 to 8 years.
You want the skill, not the credential.
We want the skill, not the credential, or the experience. Again, we all want experience, but we have a lot of new blood. We're probably going to partner with Steven on we have a new machinist, and he has a 10-week program that they're going to start. We'll give it a try. Again, I don't think the community colleges are against it. It's how do they recruit effectively for this? Are they funded properly to do that recruiting? Is it really the job of the college and the university to do that recruiting? Or is it, I'd love to see, and I've said it a million times, the whole I Love New York campaign. I would like to see I love manufacturing and construction trades in New York, and why, and how do you tell that story?
So let's explore this disconnect for a moment, because community colleges are rated on completion rates.
Horrible measurements. So people will work to measurements.
Right.
And if you have the wrong measurements in place, who's ever that boss or set that standard should be fired tomorrow.
So Grant, how do we shift this system to start to think about good paying job as the outcome versus credential?
Great question. So on average, a completion rate for community college hovers around 34%. So let that sink in. On the workforce side, what we're seeing is close to 90% completion. And we were looking at placement rates, and our placement rate is like 86%. And I was like, well, okay, so 90% and then 80%, that's pretty good. And then, but it's skewed because some of those individuals actually went into another workforce program. So they did a maintenance program, and they immediately went into the CNC program because it was like available right that as soon as they finished a program, or they entered an academic program. And again, they used some of the credits from the workforce side. So I love what Peter's saying, and we do offer nationally recognized credentials in our training, knowing full well that the employers either don't recognize them, or I don't want to say don't care because that's not an accurate thing, but they want the skill. They want the skill. The reason why we embed these credentials into it is they're portable. They stay with this individual forever. So when they do go on job interviews or they go somewhere, there's a credential tied with the training as well. So that's why we do it. And I hope these credentials take off. I mean, the recognition of them, I should say, not the credentials themselves. But again, I agree with Peter. The focus of our workforce programs is to ensure that these individuals have the skills and the knowledge that they need when they complete this program. That means 80% of their instruction is hands-on instruction versus sitting in a classroom and being lectured to. Of course, you're going to get the theory, and you're going to get the safety and everything, but it's the doing. It's the machining apart, it's the welding apart, it's the designing apart, all of that good stuff.
My observation is Watson is an enlightened employer, and others are still using the credential as a screening. Stephen, are you seeing others behave in the manner that Peter's talking about, and they're saying, give me the skill set and I'll hire them, or are you seeing folks saying, get the credential or we're not interested?
From an employer standpoint, they're more focused on the skill set, especially now. Right now, we're at a unique time in our economy where it's a job seekers market, right? Job seekers have so many options. We have 2 job fairs every year that coincides with our graduation, one in May and one in November. And our graduates have multiple job offers before they even graduate. The credential is important for the portability for their students, so they can take that if they leave their place of employment and demonstrate they have experience plus a credential to get their next opportunity. But in my opinion, for most of the businesses, they want people with skills, they want people with past experience, they want people with hands-on training that understand employer expectations and that can hit the ground running.
Great.
David, we have a question here too.
Sure. Shannon, before you jump there,
go ahead.
I want to jump to Karen on this question because it's an interesting predicament for a public sector funder. I mean, ESD has to have outputs on the backside. So has the state wrestled with that? And if not, how do you and I change that?
The state is wrestling. Before coming to ESD, I was at University of Buffalo, ran a program in there called Startup New York, which is a tax incentive for businesses that were going to create jobs. And the jobs were required to be physically located in the office, in the workplace. And you counted that they were measured on their success by how many jobs, how many people were in the workplace. We have virtual workers now everywhere. We have hybrid workers now everywhere. They would not be eligible for these benefits. The Empire State Development, New York State, DOL, we still measure success by jobs in the workplace specifically. That we don't move so fast when it comes to figuring out what's the next best way to be able to measure success. That's part of what we're excited about with what we're doing with the coalition. All these organizations are part of it, BNMA, MASS, JCC, Northland. It is important to us that what we're doing not only has multi-year funding, but I'd also add that some of the challenge in determining whether a program is good is measuring. And in those instances, once someone graduates, we lose track of them. It's hard to find out. Did they get a job? Did they get a better job? Are they still employed? Are they still here? And that's an important part of what our coalition is going to be able to do with a relationship with the intermediaries' help, with a contractual relationship with the Department of Labor. We're going to be able to track those candidates, those graduates, those folks that have been through training, and really measure and really try to figure out, are we successful? Where are we successful? Where are we falling short? So that we can continue to make improvements in those programs.
And that's a game changer because we've been afraid of privacy laws, et cetera. We can do this in a mask way, but labor market data, who got employed, how much did they make, and did they keep the job, are much better determinants of success than what credential did they have and what employers are interested in that credential. This is really exciting.
You need 3 numbers. It's all on a W-2. Their social security number, and this is privacy. Then you know the EIN of the company that they're working for, and you know their wage. So at that point, and if you can do that in a secretive way where people's identities and data is not jeopardized, your data exists.
Right.
The question is, can you get it?
I think it's happening elsewhere, and then looping it back to Stephen, looping it back to Grant, and understanding what classes did that person take, what training did they get to put them in that pathway, could change the trajectory of this work. Shannon, you had a question.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes, but
got it.
One more question.
Good evening. So we've heard about silos, the gray tsunami, a few other things, but right now there's a high school junior who's fought to go to school every day, who isn't sure what they want to do and doesn't know what's going to happen to them once they fight that good fight and graduate from high school. So do we have anything in the works for mentorship programs, for people to reach out to our young high school students to say, all right, college might not be your path, but this is what we have for you. And the encouragement to keep going, because, you know, a lot of kids fight just to get to the bus stop every day. And what they come home to at night isn't much better. So for them to actually accept that high school diploma is a real achievement for them. And some of them, they can't make it, they get their GED. But do we have anything in all of this mix saying we're reaching out to the younger people to keep them encouraged and put them on a path that doesn't necessarily have to be college, but can be something along the lines of this workforce development, manufacturing?
That's a great question, and thank you for sharing that, because it's critically important that we raise the awareness and expose young people to all the options out there, right? I'm 56 years old. I don't know why I'm telling my age, but I guess it's relevant. I'm 56 years old, and
you look good for.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I didn't meet a person of color who was an attorney until I was in my late 40s. I didn't even know that I could go to law school, or that was even an option. And my point is, we have to start to expose young people to all careers that's out there. One of the things that we did, and this came out of the partnership that Peter Coleman had with Alden High School. We have a great partnership with Alden High School. They would bring 30, 40 kids out. Half of the kids would sign up for our programs because they were exposed to advanced manufacturing in 9th grade. They knew by the 12th grade this was something they wanted to do. My point was, we did not have that same type of program with Buffalo Public Schools, with other school districts. So one of the things that we did, we partnered with Mayor Brown and received funding from the Wilson Foundation, and we launched the Summer Youth Academy. It's a 6-week program that exposes young people to careers in advanced manufacturing and clean energy. But I took it a step further. One of the things that I wanted to do was to expose them to all of the thriving industries in Western New York: healthcare, clean energy, hospitality, and tourism. So they sit in, or they participate in 1-week modules, learning around all these different careers, and we take them on a field trip every Friday to actually go to a manufacturing plant. They go to Moog, they go to Tesla, they go to the New York Power Authority, Power Vista up in Niagara Falls. They go to Great Cliff, which is a beautiful home in South Buffalo. I didn't even know what it was, but the architecture there is amazing. So we expose these young people to these careers. We had one of the doctors from one of the local hospitals. He was interested in supporting and meeting these young folks. So we had a lunch and learn with the doctor. We had 75 high school kids having lunch with the heart surgeon at Northland. 2 or 3 of them said, hey, I want to pursue these careers. I had no idea. But my point is, we have to do a better job of exposing and raising awareness to young people to these careers.
If you don't see the path, you can't get on it. And
That's right.
And all roads will lead there.
The Southern Tier has a really good program, which is Dream It, Do It.
Yes.
So if you could speak to that a little bit better than I can.
Sure. It's a collaborative effort, right? Like by the time the individuals get to us, you know, there's only so much we can do. So we do have a program called Dream It, Do It in Western New York. So they engage the high school students. They actually engage the counselors as well. So they have summer camps with that. We also had a program that we called Fridays at MTI, where we'd work with different school districts and bus those kids in that had, you know, that just wanted to explore things. And they didn't know it at the time, but when they were there on Friday, they were doing a little bit of welding, a little bit of machining, a little bit of design, working with electrics, you know, a little bit of fundamentals of electricity. We were basically exposing them to the programs that we had at the college. But that's not the reason. The other thing was the career possibilities. What can I do with this? If I weld, what can I do? So same thing that Stephen mentioned is we would work with local manufacturers and get these kids out on a tour to see what's made. And I just want to give a plug for Chautauqua County. We make a lot of really cool stuff that is all over the world. It's in space, in the White House, all of these things. So I don't think the students, and I don't think even their parents really understand a mile radius from their house what is exactly going on. So I think programs like the Dream It Do It, and like I said, the ability to bring in the students and expose them, and expose them to the manufacturers and what's made and produced here and how it's made and what the skills are, is an upper hand.
So I want to ask one last question, and we're running out of time, so you've got 30 to 45 seconds each. What gives you hope about making this system work and starting to reconnect the supply and the demand side of the employment chain? Karen?
Well, I'm not a politician, but I'm going to do a political answer by saying I want to give an answer to a different question.
Okay.
That I just wanted to point out Buffalo Futures, the digital network that provides great information for career pathways for students. It's rolled out. It's fantastic. There's people here that can share more information about it. I think it's important that we make note of that in this conversation as well. And I'm excited about our coalition. I'm excited about what Northland is doing. There was a great event today that I attended that I'm let you talk about it in your 40 seconds, but that I was a guest, but at Tesla they were having a graduation of 13 students who came through a training program that Stephen and Northland put together, and to see these the people, you know, young, old, every ethnicity, that the 13 very varied folks that were all going to start a career at Tesla. And it was super exciting. We're really excited to see it happening. What they're doing is being translated into real jobs in our community right now.
Great. Stephen?
What gives me hope is everybody in this room. I think Northland was a demonstration of what could happen when we have the resources, we have a plan, we have business partners. It's funny because I get a lot of credit for the success of Northland, but I just feel like I'm the race car driver trying not to crash this amazing race car that you guys designed into the first term. I mean, support from ESD, Wilson Foundation, the BNMA, the Alfred State, SUNY Erie's, we've all come together to lift up this model and demonstrated that it worked. So I believe moving forward, if we can replicate that strategy and scale it and create other collaborations like that, we'll have some success, and that's what gives me hope.
I'm excited about what we're doing at RJ Watson, the team that we've built. The individuals that work there are encouraged every day to come to work. We have a great culture. We have 4 or 5 guys that have 150 years of experience in the company, and now we have our new leadership team that has evolved that are all, you know, in the early 30s, and then the support team that we have on the floor. We are building great things. We're building amazing bridge components and products for North America primarily. And they've performed exceptionally. And we're doing good things, we're profitable, and we're growing. And, you know, we had to evolve, and we evolve every day, but I just think it's the culture that I see in the community is encouraging, and the people want to work, and they want to deliver high-quality product in a safe place.
Right. Grant?
Yeah. Well, there's a saying, you know, one hand can't clap. So it's a collective of everybody, our partners, our funders, the employers, and also the students that are coming into our programs are highly motivated, and that gives me hope. I mean, they're there with a purpose. They show up every day. They treat it like it's work, and so that gives me hope. And I do appreciate the funding and everything to get these concepts and get them and to make them into a reality. And there's a lot of emphasis on Buffalo, which there should be. It's a big manufacturing hub, but do not discount the southern tier. I mean, we're part of Western New York, of course, but don't discount Chautauqua County, Cattaraugus, and Allegheny. You got to come down and see what's happening down there. It's fantastic.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface and we're over time. So please thank this great panel for the conversation.
And thank you so much to our panel. Such an important conversation. Thank you to David Egner for moderating everything. Give it up for them one more time. Am I on? We're going to continue the conversation. There's so much power in this room here to create solutions about this important conversation. We have dessert, we have coffee. So let's continue the conversation. Make sure that you are you subscribe to Tight Knit and take out your phone. If you need any help, I'll be walking around, roaming around. So I'll be able to help you subscribe. But we can also continue the conversation on the social media for Tight Knit as well. So let's continue to do that. But let's go get some dessert. Let's get some chocolate in us and some coffee.
Hey, thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you.